I got nothing but love. Come on. Got a whole lot of love for your mama. I got a whole lot of love for you.
Fraternity was the first fraternity established here in the United States. And that Alpha Alpha was the first black fraternity. Through me and my Sororities, we did a little research on our own, finding out that neither one of these are true. Okay, the fraternal system stems all the way back to Egypt and incorporates elements of masonry, things of that nature. Not to get too specific because I'm just learning myself. And then what started the revelation recently was finding out that Alpha Alpha was not the first black fraternity. In fact, it was another fraternity that was started in 1904 in Philadelphia called Psi Phi. So this evening I'm going to be learning just as well as you. Okay. And if you would, please give a warm welcome for our speaker this evening, Seko Varner.
All right, peace and blessings. I want to start off by having everyone stand, please. It's an African tradition to start everything off by giving honor and respect to the Creator. And I'm going to finish with that. I'm going to start and finish with that tradition. It's called Libation. Prayer, as we know it, has come out of libation. And actually, Brother Delane, you want to join me? Brother here and I are involved in a rites of passage group that we deal with young boys from 7 to 18, and we bring them into manhood. So it's only right to have him next to my side, since I did bring him in and fold them into you. I'm going to use some terms that you may not be familiar with. One is Akabulan, which is the indigenous original name for Africa. I may use the term Kemet, which is the indigenous or original name for Egypt. And some of you may be familiar with that. I saw your heads nodding. I'm also going to use the term Ashe, which means let it be. Alright? When I say Ashe, as black folks do, when I say it, you'll respond. That's called a response. That's part of our culture. So I'm going to do a libation. It's kind of serious. And it's something that I want to show with you because it's something that you can actually involve your organizations or yourselves in. It's normally done with water. Sometimes it's done with wine. The Negro or the nigger version is using pouring beer on the corner. But it goes back to Akabulan. It goes back to Africa. We've been doing that for years, thousands of years. But we took some liquid and we poured it into the ground Mother Earth representing our community. The liquid representing the knowledge from our ancestors. The vessel that's pouring the liquid representing the Creator. The Creator holds the knowledge of our ancestors because the Creator gave our ancestors that knowledge. That knowledge is poured into our community, and it helps us to grow better. That's the symbology behind libation. That's why we pour beer out on the corner. That's why we've been doing it for years. Most of us didn't know where it came from. Now we do. And hopefully it was something you can do, because if we recognize our ancestors who gave us so much, I mean, none of us would be right here where we are today if somebody didn't die, shed some blood, go through some hardship, get raped, get struggled, get beat upon, abused. We are all here because our people went through that. That's the reason we're here. So, if you want to bow your heads, you can. If you want to keep your heads high, you can. It doesn't matter, as long as you respect the Creator. Giving honor and respect to the Creator, who is known by many names, both genders, different cultures, all groups. We give honor and respect to you who gives life, in the mother form and the father form. Ashe.
Ashe.
We give honor to our ancestors on the continent of Akabulan, known as Africa, who built great civilizations: Kem, Nubia, Kush, the Tanzanians, the Ethiopians, all the great civilizations of Akabulan in the traditional sense, in the antiquity sense. We give respect and honor because that wisdom, knowledge, and understanding is the basis of what we learn today in our universities or our universities. Ashe. Ashe. We give honor to our ancestors, particularly those from West Africa, who were stolen through the Great Ma'afa, which is the Holocaust of African slavery, who were taken to South America first, who were taken to South America, Central America, what is known as Latin America now, who went to Brazil, who went to Peru, Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, who went to Honduras, who went to Lima, who eventually were taken to what's known as the United States of America, who struggled to maintain life so that we can be where we are today. We give those ancestors who are a part of the Creator great respect and honor. Ashe.
Ashe.
We give honor and respect to those ancestors who made it through the Middle Passage into America, who survived through the Reconstruction era, who built America with the help of our Native American brethren, who built America as we know it. Ashe.
Ashe.
We give honor and respect to our ancestors during the Jim Crow era, during the Civil Rights era, who gave up their lives, their money, their jobs, their families, their livelihoods, their culture, so that we could have a better life. Ashe.
Ashe.
We give honor and respect to our individual ancestors, be they whatever culture, African, Indian, Asian, European, who are all a part of us right now. We give honor and respect to those ancestors who did good, who made our lives easier, who because of them, we can be the people we are today. Individually, our fathers, our mothers, our grandmothers, our grandfathers, our uncles, our extended family of ancestors. Ashe.
Ashe.
We give honor and respect to ourselves because we have the essence and the presence of the Creator inside of us. And once we're going to tap into that presence, we can do great things. We can be blessings to ourselves and to other people. We honor ourselves because we know we have the Spirit of the Creator in us. Ashe.
Ashe.
And lastly, we give honor and respect to the Creator for being involved, as I said earlier, in all cultures, all tongues, both genders, for giving us life and preserving life, and for being that greater force that guides us and can be a guide if we allow ourselves to be leadable. Ashe, ashe, ashe.
Ashe. Ashe. Ashe.
You got to see. If you go to the African continent, if you step into a village now, people will pour a libation to wish you well, to make sure that your journey here in their area is a good one. Native American tribes pour libation too. Those tribes that have a large influx of Afrikan-Indians. As Afrikan-Americans, we have to recognize that we have majority African and a lot of Native American Indians. But what some people don't realize is a lot of Native Americans have us in them. A lot of them have us in them as well. And it's important that we know our true history and our whole history. I do a presentation, hopefully you get to see it one day, on the African influences in Latin America. Because we deal with American blacks, North American blacks, but in our so-called Black History Month or African American History Month, they're trying to rename it now, we don't deal with our brethren and sisters who went to Latin America, South America. South America has the largest concentration of people of African descent outside of Africa. The second place in the world that has the largest concentration of people of African descent is India. We don't study it. So the people that don't like these things, those are our people too. Those are our people too on the wheel. And that's why, particularly if you look at their women, they look sort of like all women, except for those noses and the texture of their hair. And if you look at people of Asian descent, this book here is divine. It's by Ivan Van Sertima, The African Presence in Early Asia. People are flipping now because Tiger Woods' mom is Thai. But Thai have a lot of African in them way back in the day. And they were colonized by the Europeans. And they were Asiatic people. They know it. The first dynasty in China was an African dynasty, the Qing dynasty. Martial arts came out of Africa. It went to an area in China, and the person who actually brought martial arts in China was known to be dark, flat-nosed, big-lipped, and curly hair. If you look at the early pictures of Buddha, Buddha had what? He was a Buddha brother. He had big lips, big nose, peasy hair. They know it. We just don't know because what we don't read. But that's not my topic tonight. Can you catch me on the video?
Yes, do it.
Because I bounce around. Bounce around a lot. The topic that I'm going to deal with tonight is the African origins of fraternities, sororities, and I'm briefly going to touch on Mason. How many Greeks do we have in here? Okay. Well, it's good to see that we have a good balance of so-called Greeks and non-so-called Greeks. And I use the term so-called Greek because back until the 60s, if you talk to the older brothers and sisters, they will say Greek letter. We, for some reason, now drop the letter and call ourselves Greek. Do we have a real basis for calling out, and I'm a brother of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Do we have a real basis for calling ourselves Greek? Those of us who are Greek. Yes, sir.
I think that it's really a lot of disillusion as far as the members when they get in the organization, because I think the history that's taught within the organization only deals with the beginnings of the organization, within the conflict within the United States and abroad. They don't look at what forces led to them being developed here in America, right? Not just here, but back in the mother country. I think that because black people, and I'm pretty sure Brother Jackson will piggyback on these, black people have a tendency to drop things because they don't like to say a lot of things. So instead of saying Greek letter organization, say Greeks. And they don't real anything because of the letter structure of the organization, not necessarily a racial background or a historical background as far as ancient Greece or Sparta or any of the other city-states that exist in that region of the world.
I have to agree with you because being a member of a Greek letter organization, being involved with so-called Greekdom, there's very little we do in our organization that is quote-unquote Greek. Very little. Anyone else want to make a comment? What is there specific? Can we really claim Greek? Can we call ourselves Greek?
As far as I'm concerned, not really. Just picking back what he said because he said a lot.
Right.
One thing, I'm a member of Afrikan-Americans Fraternity Incorporated. Only thing that I've learned that we can associate with Greek is actually the letters. Because most of it, like he said, most of our history is stemming back from African culture and the struggles that we had in America. It has absolutely positively nothing to do with the Greek cultures or, the Hellenic civilizations that,
Right.
Western civilization was built on.
Right. Okay. Well, the Greek letters aren't even Greek. So if we call ourselves Greek letter organizations based because we have Greek letters when the Greek letters weren't even actually Greek, then we're lying to ourselves doubly. However, there's a curious thing called a black Greek. And I'm going to explain that curious thing called a black Greek. The first civilized part of Greece was Crete, C-R-E-T-E. You've learned that, right? Where did the Cretians come from? That's the island they settled on. Where did they come from? Curious thing called a black Greek. Now, I got this information out the Encyclopedia Britannica. I had it, my father bought it, I guess when I was born. It dates back to 68. So, this is what folk been saying about us since 68. Probably before then, because I haven't looked at any other encyclopedias. But this is a curious thing called the Black Greek. And I'm going to be paraphrasing from the Encyclopedia Britannica. The first portion of Greek to be civilized was Crete. And I'm quoting, an important economic relationship existed between Egypt and the Aegean Sea during the 27th dynasty of Egypt, which was actually the 25th dynasty because European scholars take off 2 dynasties while we add 2 dynasties. They don't recognize 2 dynasties existed. But during the 27th dynasty, they're thinking. Minoan ceramics were imported into Egypt until the reign of Thutmose III. On these vases, found in Egyptian tombs, depict Cretan and Minoan dress bringing tributary gifts to Egypt. So these Cretans and these Minoans were bringing gifts to Egypt. Why is a whole country bringing some gifts to Egypt? Well, the reason just passed us. April 15th, we had to give our gifts to Egypt. We had to pay taxes. These vases depict the Cretans and the Minoans paying taxes to who? Egypt. Okay, on these vases found in Egyptian tombs depict creation and Minoan dress bringing tributary gifts to Egypt. These were found to date back to 1450 BC. We know from the classic historian Fulk, who was born in 1879, died in 1879, that the Kemetians, Egyptians, had conquered Greece in that area. The Kemetians called the Crete or Grecians Kefetu, which is a African or an Egyptian word. And a place called Greece was called Kenosis. The last datable object at Crete depicted the Kemetic rule of the Cretians. In other words, we used to rule Crete, which was the first civilized portion of Greece. It's in your encyclopedias. It's in your history books. Yes, sir.
Would that have anything to do with the Hebrew point also too? I can't think of any book, whether it goes, but he's saying how that we told that was it Romulus and Remus and Romulus, two brothers.
No, they found it wrong though.
Rome, but and we're also told that I forgot the people that supposedly founded Greece, but anyway, it was saying that Greece was originally in its early days an Egyptian colony.
It was an Egyptian colony.
No.
But it was before Egypt. Let me get into that because you're jumping ahead of me. And I'm glad you're up on that. If you have any comments or questions, just raise your hand and jump in. Okay. In fact, the last datable object at Crete depicted the Kemetic rule of the Cretians. This object is a plaque having the seal of Queen Ty. Now, hopefully the brothers passed out some information to you. If you're looking at information, I'm not sure what page it is, you'll find a picture of Queen Ty. Brother, you had a black jacket on right there. If you can lift yours up, lift that piece of paper up. Yeah, now the sister in the bottom, in the back, that's Queen Ty. You didn't get a full booklet. You didn't get a full booklet? Talk to the Alpha brothers. Okay. This object is a plaque having the seal of Queen Ty. In other words, this sister said, this is mine. You put a seal on something that belongs to you or something that has credence to your name and your word is Javon. That's a seal. This plaque also depicts how Cretan civilization was destroyed around 1400 BC by a volcanic eruption. So basically what happened was these Cretans around 400 BC, a lot of them died because of a volcanic eruption. Now, it also tells you in Encyclopedia Britannica, the first Cretans were immigrants. And I'm going to read verbatim again. These immigrants had a highly developed civilization, higher than surrounding it in Europe. There were only two ways immigrants could migrate, and that was from the east, which is Italy and Europe. And as I said earlier, the sentence earlier, these civilizations were more highly developed than Europe. Italy is part of Europe. The only other way it could have come in, I said there was two ways, was the south. And that involved Africa, Asia Minor, or both. If you study Asia Minor goes into Persia, I mean not Persia, but some of the Iranian areas, you know, that you see the so-called Muslims in, and actually included Africa. If you look at the old maps, Asia Minor included the whole of North Africa. Okay. In the east, it further says, the Encyclopedia Britannica further says, in the east, they were still in the Cro-Magnon period. What's the Cro-Magnon?
That's like caveman.
Caveman. So we had highly developed civilizations, and we had cavemen. So basically, Encyclopedia Britannica is telling us that we, people of African descent, we ruled Crete at one time. We were the first people in Crete. And what happened is, Crete was ruled first by the Ethiopians. Ethiopia is the only country in Africa that was never taken over by European rule. Ethiopia is the only country that was never taken over by Assyrian, Asian rule. Ethiopia is a place where all the strong brothers and sisters stayed. Now, in the Bible, who was the queen of Ethiopia? Queen of Sheba. What's the story about King Solomon, who lived in Asia Minor, and Queen of Sheba?
Solomon was a man of great wisdom.
Okay, what else?
And she had a question, I believe, for Solomon, and she wanted him to answer the original. She wanted to answer it. And she was all, at the time she came, she was amazed by all the gold and everything that he had. Well, not the gold, but the temples that he had.
Right.
And so she we got together and whatever, and that's how that went.
PK. Preacher's kid, you know. And everyone agree with that pretty much story? Okay. Here's the real deal. The Bible doesn't tell you the whole thing. Queen Sheba owned all of that area. She was making a trip going, picking up her taxes. King Solomon was basically a hoe. She was getting her money. She was like the pimp. He was the pimp the whole routine. Give me my money. Show me the money. She was going around collecting the money. She heard a lot that he was very wise, and he always paid his taxes on time. It tells you this in Ethiopian and Egyptian texts. Those historical documents found in Ethiopia and Egypt. That she was going around and she owned that area. At that time, Egypt was still kind of small. She owned that area. She was getting money. She was going getting people her tax money. She was like the IRS. She went there, and in the text it says she went to get her taxes, and she asked them a question. She asked everyone who was managing her money questions to make sure they were astute. You got to stay on your employees. If you employ people, you got to make sure they know what they're doing. And that's what she was doing. He did trickery. Solomon was a man. He had many wives. At that time, he could have many wives. Interestingly enough, all of his wives came from Ethiopia. Now, if you want to be a wise man, who do you surround yourself with? Wise women. Wise women. Let's not front. A whole bunch of brothers do a whole bunch of stupid ish. On the real. Involve yourselves with some women that are more intelligent than you, and what do you become? More intelligent. He had 9 wives. All of them came from Ethiopia. Were one of the biggest temples for women, one of the biggest universities. We say university now, we see university, because they learn about everything in university. He got these women who had studied and married, had them in his court. A little different than the way we look at it now, because we think, husband and wife, this one-on-one. But it was a little different back then. If you look at the way Africans took on many wives, many times the queen wife would choose the other wives, and some of them never had sexual connections with the husband. But that's different than the way the Arabs did it, who had big harems. And most of the men here in America, we want to have those big harems. Boys. I apologize. But the Africans had big courts where these women would come out, and they had other consorts, other people they were married to, but that was his main husband. So King Solomon had all these women who made him intelligent and wise, because a decision came to him, he would step back, consult with his group, get a right answer, because men and women think differently. We see one half, women see the other half. You put both halves together, you see a whole picture. And he made wise decisions that way. It's in history. It's not in the Bible, because the Bible only deals with a certain family. If you break down the Bible, it deals with one big family. It didn't deal with everybody in the world. It deals with one big family. I'm not down in the Bible. Any of us who are believers in the Bible, the basic instructions before leaving Earth, I'm not down. Okay, that's just the truth. So, the Cretians were originally African people. Now we add Asia in there, because it says Asia Minor. And what happened in Asia Minor is that's where the Africans and the Europeans kind of mixed. All right, the Minoan culture, all the other cultures that were in that area. If you look at people who are Arabian today, they're basically a mixed people of Asian people and African people, of European people and Asian people, of white people and African people. That's basically it. Okay, so Crete was first ruled by Ethiopia. Ethiopia was the mother of Egypt. Egypt came out of Ethiopia. What were the first pyramids built? Tanzania. Tanzania. Farther down in Africa. Wish I had a picture of Africa. Not the Tanzania that we know now. It was a little higher. But if you read the history of Egypt, they write their own history. Our culture traveled up the Nile. And the Nile runs wet at the beginning, it's white, and then it turns blue. It goes upwards. South to north. Actually, it goes north to south. The world is really just upside down. But if you look at it from a European standpoint, it puts Europe on the face and as a center point, and everything else is backwards and upside down. But the world is a circle. Now, we knew that. Christopher Columbus, when he left, and he had Moorish maps with him from the Moors that were just kicked out of Spain in 1492. The Moors who were black people like Othello. Moorish people who were black people. He had Moorish maps. That's why he said the earth is not flat when everyone around him was saying the earth is flat. And well, I'm getting too deep. Okay. The Cretians were first Africans. If you look at Greek gods, in the first drawings and depictions for the first 1,000 years that they drew the Greek gods, what color were the Greek gods? Blue black, purple black. As black as his jacket did. African black. Beautiful black. If you read the Greek culture, they tell you mythologically the two people that brought them language because they couldn't speak were two African women. And they show them as having big breasts, big lips, and a big butt. European women didn't have that at that time.
Still don't got it.
Well, now they got this liposuction and all this other stuff. And they got, what is it, the Burns Master and all this other stuff.
Injection.
All right. Now, I'm not a smart person. I'm not a very intelligent person. Actually, it's very hard for me to learn. I just read a whole lot of books, so that's what I have up here. And you can do the same thing with this information. It's not all in one book, however. But the majority of the information I'm coming from tonight will come out of these two books. Non-Violent Civilization, some of you pick that up. And this book, which is extremely hard to get, and I ain't let none of y'all touch it. Pratt and Sorrow, The African Origins of Greek-Lettered Organizations. I was on back order for this for a year and a half. Once they finally got it in, they called me, I left work when they got it. By the time I got to the store, they had ordered 5. They said 5 came in. This was the last one in. I don't know why it's so hard to get. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't have the money to put behind our books. You know, it's not a Wait to Exhale or something that's really exciting. You know, it's not going to focus our energies emotionally. So it's not a bestseller, so we don't have the money to put into these type of books. So sometimes you got to get them while you can. Okay, but the Greek gods are dark complected. They have curly hair. Now, if we took an African person and we mixed it with a European person, what texture of their hair, how would the hair texture be?
Curly?
It would be curly. Our hair is super curly. It's peasy. I mean, when your hair knocks up, it basically curls up. Our hair is very curly. The Greek gods didn't have like S-curl hair, J-curl hair. They had peasy hair. Later on, you may notice the Greek gods, the hair got looser, S-curl, Jerry curl. Then the hair got straight. One of the things you find in any people is whenever they accept God, after a period of time, that conception of God will look more and more like them as they become closer and closer to trying to understand the Creator. So some of that may have some racist undertones, but also that's very normal. Alright? Okay, so the Greek gods were black complected, they had curly hair, and Zeus was called the Ethiopian, which means Ethiopian. And anyone ever heard of Aesop's fables?
Yes.
Aesop was an Ethiopian slave who was taken into Greece. And he didn't feel like doing a whole lot of work. So whenever his boss came around, his master came around to get on his case, he would start telling them jokes and entertaining. He became very well known for having an oratory gift. Our people have oratorical gifts. Wherever you find our people, you'll find that oratory becomes the basis of our culture. Hip-hop is based on oratory gifts. Original jazz music had a lot of call and response and a lot of oomph and things like that added in. That's the oratorical gift. If you listen to Latin music, which is completely African-based, and they know it. Latin music has more African than the rock and roll and hip-hop does. but that's another presentation. Zeus is recorded in Greek mythology as having, he often had dinner and consulted with Ethiopians, faultless men. In other words, in Greek mythology, Zeus used to go over to Ethiopia, dine with these kings, dine with these black men, get wisdom and knowledge, and go back to Greece. It's in their history. It's in their mythology. I will quote, he often had dinner and consulted with Ethiopians, faultless men. So basically what happened in Crete was, we went over there, we took over, we set up a civilization. There was 3 earthquakes. Volcanic eruptions. No, earthquakes. The first was a volcanic eruption. Messed some of our people up. That's when Ethiopia ruled. Egyptians went over there and took over. Because at that time, Ethiopian turned into Egypt. Egyptians took over after the first volcanic eruption. They went over there, we were over there parlaying, we mixed with the Europeans who had no knowledge of themselves. They were still Caucasus Asians. Asians who lived in the Caucasus Mountains of European. Caucasus Asian. They mixed with us, da-da-da-da-da. There was an earthquake. Some of them died. Then the last few remaining people who were there were taken over by some of the European groups. And as proof of that, if you look at people who are Grecian now, they are light-skinned blacks. They have our noses. They have our lips. They have curly hair.
Look at most of the southern most of the European countries along the Mediterranean coastline, southern Italy,
Exactly.
Spain, so all those countries, they're a darker hue.
Very dark hue. As a matter of fact, in Italy at one time, the darker you were, the more you were regarded as having rich background. As a matter of fact, this mafia, the original mafia used to call themselves the Order of the Black Hand, because a lot of their peeps were our peeps. If you look at Italians today, they act like us. They loud. They talk like this all the time, and they want to be matched, Another thing that connected with that is the Moroccans or the Moors, from where the term Moreno, which means black, Morentinini, which is an Italian name, which means black. We took over Russia. The Moors took over Russia. Germany, you've heard of the Black Russian drink?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's a Black Russian in this book. It shows you the African origins of Russia. That's why they're dark. They took over that area, and interestingly enough, there's a disease that we have in America here called sickle cell anemia. We've heard of that, right? If you're European and you have sickle cell anemia, it's called the Mediterranean disease. Sickle cell anemia was the body's natural way of protecting itself against the Black Plague that happened in Europe. When the Black Plague happened in Europe, all them white folks, glad and didn't mix, started dying. The only people who didn't die from the Black Plague were those who had us in them. And they have what's called the Mediterranean disease, when their blood cells make sickle shapes. So, there may be some honor in maybe calling ourselves Black Greek, because the first Greeks were black. But since many of them died in volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, I'm not so sure if we can really tie ourselves ancestrally with them. However, the first Cretians were immigrants. They came from Africa and Asia Minor. Okay, so the curious thing called a Black Greek. So for those of us who are in Greek-lettered organizations, next time somebody steps to us, why y'all wearing Greek letters, you can tell them the first Greeks were black. And if they don't believe it, they can read Cretan history. If you go to a Greek text, it really just kind of flows over Greece. But if you go to something that says Crete, C-R-E-T-E, an encyclopedia, it will give you that background. So, I'm not one of those who calls myself Greek, however, because I understand the whole deeper sense of it. But some of us want to do that, and that's fine. But now we have a basis in which to do so. Now, that's just the first part of my presentation. And I'm kind of long-winded, as you can see. So I'm going to try to break this down to make it a little shorter. Okay, the black Greeks. I just talked about the black Greeks. Africa and Egypt. If you read Egyptian history and African history, they say that pygmies, the bushmen, people who were small and, you know, it was always in Tarzan movies, they traveled up the Nile and they brought history, knowledge, and culture. Their religion was based on the environment. All African people are descended of those things. All of us. The Egyptians talk about that in their historical text. That it was pygmies, they did different groups, then became the Ethiopians. As I say, Tanzania was the first place they had pyramids. In Tanzania and in Ethiopia, when they had pyramids, they were burial chambers. In Egypt, pyramids were not burial chambers. We've been lied to about that for a long time, but I'll get to that. So, Egypt came out of African people. It was the zenith of our civilization. Some people will tell you, oh, the Egyptians were mixed people. Oh, the Egyptians were white at one time. Oh, the Egyptians were Asian and Persian at one time. That's all true. Well, if you look on that information packet that the Alpha's passed out to you, it shows you, hopefully, I hope I put all of that in there, the dynasties of Egypt. So you can look at that at your leisure. I gave you information, you can look at it at your leisure. But it's in there. And that's basically it. Until the 27th dynasty, African dynasty, not the European-based dynasty, but the African dynasty, it was black rule. And even when Persia, Greece, Rome, and the Arabs came in and took over Egypt, it was just like you and I going over and taking over the White House. All right? We take over the White House, that doesn't mean that everyone in the country is black. It just means we took over the White House. And that's what happened. It was Persian rule. It was Roman rule. And people are going to mix with other people. Males and females like, I like having sex. We have sex. And when you do that, you're going to blend groups. You're going to blend colors. And that's what happened with the Egyptians. But it didn't happen to a certain point in time. And interestingly enough, they had in Egypt and in Tanzania and Ethiopia these called mystery schools. And these mystery schools were places where people went and they pledged for like 40 years. They went and studied information and learned how to develop themselves. And it usually took about 30, 40 years, depending on what track you took. You can still go to Egypt and study in these mystery schools. Dr. Ben Yannikin just about 7 years ago became a 360-degree Mason. They tell us you can only go to 33 levels, right? You can go 360 levels. But you have to go to Asia, India, and then finalize your studies in Africa to be 360-degree Mason. That's a deep brother. But they only tell us you can go 32 or 30 degrees here in America. Scottish rites. You know, they don't know all the information. They got to go back to Africa to do it. So basically, Africa came out of pygmies. I mean, pygmy people. Then they turned into Tanzania, Ethiopia. That was a big culture. You know, we had the Cushites, the Nubians. A lot of us say Nubian sister. We don't know what we're talking about. What's the Nubian? A person from Nubia. Where is Nubia? Yeah.
Somebody just said it.
Yes.
I think Nubia is in Eastern Africa.
Where did most blacks in America come from? What part of Africa? What's interesting though, we are basically saying that we have a historical and a cultural connection with our people in Africa when we say that. So there's nothing wrong with that. Alright? Nothing wrong. The people, if you go to any city, you'll find downtown where there's a whole bunch of excitement, there's a lot of things going on, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of people who are highly educated. Then you're going to find your ghettos, where people are removed from that. Africa was a continent, and that same thing was happening. There were some areas where people were highly civilized, and then there were some areas where basically because they were cut off from that, they weren't to that apex. And understand that the African apex was knocked down and smacked down by invaders. So it's slightly different. But we have to keep that in mind whenever we call ourselves Nubian or African. It's true. We have a cultural connection to Africa, yes. But let's understand what we're saying when we use these terms. I still use it, now that I understand it. Hopefully you will too, now that you understand it. Now, Egypt became the apex of civilization. One of the things that happened for Egypt to become the apex of civilization is its location in regards to the rivers and the oceans. There are certain currents. If you go to Mexico and you put a floating boat in the water, the current will take it to Egypt. We rode the currents and were able to travel all over the world. Because of this, we met with other people, learned information. The concept of the letter zero was an Aztec concept. Egyptians dealt with numbers 1 through 9. They talked about a nothing, but they didn't use the term zero. That's an Aztec number. We traveled, we got information, we brought it back. Mexico was once owned by the Queen of Sheba. Mexico was owned by the Queen of Sheba. That sister was tight. She was tight. So Egypt became the apex of civilization. In Egypt, you find a lot of the symbols our Greek letter organizations use. What are some of the symbols that you've seen in Greek letter organizations that can be found in Egypt? Sphinx. Pyramid. Torches.
I don't know if you use elephants in ancient Egypt. I'm understanding.
There was an island called Elephantino Island, and in this island there were 7 elephants arranged in a circle. And in this, it was an island, but basically it was a water pool. It was something that water spouted out of. And they had 7 huge carved elephants. It was a delta region of Africa. A lot of us don't know that, but that's true. I have a brother, I can't think of his name right now, but he does a whole slide presentation on it. And I was really trying to get him down here tonight to show you that so you can see it right and exact, but he couldn't make it tonight. But I'll make sure that if you're interested, you'll get that information. But a lot of the apex civilization type things happen in Egypt. If you go to the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., who set up Washington, D.C.? Okay, he was a Mason. He was a Mason. Okay. Benjamin Banneker set up Washington, D.C. based on his studies of Egypt. In Egypt, you find an obelisk, which is that tall statue that's kind of pointy shape. What does that mean? It's a phallic symbol. It's saying that the God will be reborn. Washington, D.C. was Egypt reborn. It became the capital. It became the apex. Europeans know what they did. On the dollar bill has a pyramid. What is a pyramid? Let me tell you about the pyramid. Has anyone ever heard of, the name just left me, Imhotep? Yeah. Okay, who's Imhotep? First multi-genius. We might want to call him the first multi-genius, but as I told you, when you study in the mystery temples, and I'm going to go into that a little deeper or later, you study at a university where you learn all the sciences. He was mostly the greatest of those people who came out of the mystery system. Okay. If you go into Greece, you'll find a picture of Imhotep, who's called Asclepius. Any people studying chemistry and biology in here? No? Word? Oh, okay. You know the Hippocratic Oath?
That's what I know what it is.
That's the oath the doctors have to take before they become doctors. They do all that studying, they pass this, and this. Then they say the Hippocratic Oath. Because who was the so-called father of medicine?
Supposedly Hippocrates.
Okay, Hippocrates. The Hippocratic Oath says he gives praise and honor to Asclepius, who is the Greek name for Imhotep. Because he knew where his science came from. We just didn't. So, Imhotep came out the mystery system. He was worshipped in early Europe as the Prince of Peace and Prince of Healing. And this was in Christian churches. The early Christian churches worshipped Asclepius as the Prince of Peace and Healing. Interestingly enough, if you look at some of the older Bibles, they talk about Yahshua, Ben Pandora, or Jesus, son of the Panther, the anointed one of Christ, who went to Egypt and disappeared off the face of the earth for about, 32 years? And then came out doing miracles. In some of those older Bibles, it tells you that he studied in Egypt. King James Version alludes to it. He went to Egypt. They don't say what happened when he went to Egypt, but it says he went to Egypt. Imhotep went through that mystery system, went through that universe city. He came out and he was the advisor to the king. Any people from Sigma Gamma Rho here?
No.
Okay, their national convention is called the Boule. Boule means advisor to the king. Imhotep was the advisor to the king. This is an interesting story. The pharaoh was called the bringer of rain, the rainmaker. He prayed and prayed and prayed that rain would come for his people. That was his main duty. He had to pray and pray that rain would come for his people. Egypt had a funny situation going on. It would have 7 years of feast, 7 years of famine. In those 7 years of famine, it was on that pharaoh's head to make sure he prayed. If he didn't pray and water didn't come, his head was cut off. They weren't joking. They were serious. They were real serious. During one period of time, there was supposed to be a 7-year feast and a water stop. Egypt has these water pools under it. These water pools are the areas where water shoots out and fills the oceans and the lakes and the streams. It comes from under the ground. If you study geology, it'll tell you about that. The water dried up in Egypt during a time when it should have been famine, feast. So Pharaoh was tripping. He's like, "Yo, what's happening here?" So he gets with his advisor, and he tells his advisor, "Find out what's happening." They send their people out. They're doing some investigations. His men find out and report back to Imhotep, because Imhotep had done some mathematical calculations and found out which was the major water table feeding all of that area. They studied that water table. They found out there was a big boulder blocking the water. A whole bunch of rocks put together, blocking the water. Interestingly enough, the Pharaoh was having a problem because his brother wanted to be Pharaoh and couldn't be Pharaoh. And he was trying to become Pharaoh. What story does it sound like?
Like movie.
And it was just on the movies. Disney just made a movie of it. The Lion King. Set wanted to be king. Set, short for Satan. The devil wanted to be king. Same thing in heaven, Satan was supposed to be the most knowledgeable of the angels. He wanted to take over and got booted out down to hell. He was the most knowledgeable of the angels. It's an old story. That's why the Lion King was set in Africa. It's an African story. The story of Osiris and Horus and Set and those Egyptian stories is the same story. It's an old African story. The brother wants to take what the other brother has. So, found out that the other brother in his camp had put all these rocks and blocked the water table. So, they cleared up the water table and the water was flowing again. The Pharaoh was saved and he was happy. But Imhotep came to the Pharaoh and said, "Look, this could happen again. And maybe next time we're not quick enough to get all the rocks up before they take your head off. I want to devise something so we can have clean water." Because if they didn't have the water coming during those times when it was famine, they had a whole bunch of dirty water. The pyramids were a water purification tablet. They had where the water was pumped in, it was purified. If you look in Our Valley Contributions, it'll describe how the water was cleansed. And it was a deep process. They had oils involved, and they had these big mirror type things. And the sun would hit down and make such a heat, and it would boil the water. The water would be pumped out the sides. And if you know what the symbol delta means in Latin or Greek, it means continuous energy. What moves continuously? Two things: water and electricity. The reason water moves continuously is because of electricity. So the water will pump out the side of the pyramid. He built a smaller one. Now, he used the symbol, and it was a step pyramid. If you look at the first pyramid, Saqqara, it was steps. It's not smooth. It was stepping. He used that form because in Tanzania and in Ethiopia, they had used that as burial chambers. And every symbol that they use in Africa has three meanings. In America, we put pictures on the wall because they look nice. We give our babies names because they sound cute. You know, we do things like that. In African tradition, there was three meanings for every symbol. There's a physical meaning, a mental meaning, and a spiritual meaning. Three levels of life: physical, mental, and spiritual. So, Imhotep knew what they stood for. He knew what the pyramids stood for. He used that as a water purification model. He later built the one that we see in Egypt that is nice and flat line, because that's the one that he later, the first smaller one was the Saqqara, and it was built in Saqqara, and it was a step pyramid. That was the first pyramid he built. Then he had them build a second one. Now, of course, Imhotep died in the building of the second one, but he already had his plans laid out. They used to tell us that our people were buried in the pyramids. You can't bury a person and let them decay anywhere you have water being purified. So where were our people buried? On the east, where you find the Valley of the Kings and Queens. Where you find the Valley of the Kings and Queens, where all the Africans and Egyptians, kings and queens, were buried. They didn't find any of them in the pyramids. That's why they keep looking in the pyramids. And they found King Tut's tomb in the Valley of the Kings and Queens. They didn't find him in the pyramids. So, Egypt, or Kemet, was the apex of civilization. From that apex, we find that Egyptians traveled all over the world. Like I said earlier, Mexico used to be owned by the Queen of Sheba. Egyptians and the Ethiopians, who were in connection with them, did a lot of travel because the currents would take them various places. If you look in the pyramids, they show you pictures and symbols and plans for boats, ships, and gliders. Gliders. Am I saying they had gliders back then? I don't know. But they had plans for them. They were planning something deep. Yes, sir.
I'll put this out here. If they had the technology to build pyramids, and they had plans for gliders, it seems conceivable that they had, you could make a light material which could be airborne and could be flown. If they conceived the idea, it's quite possible that they achieved it. And consider that so much knowledge has been seized or kept away from our people for so long anyway.
That's very conceivable. I haven't studied anywhere where it proves that, but I've seen the plans.
Yes. If you read Now About Civilization, they have a figure that's shaped somewhat like a bird, and it has wings like a bird, it's shaped like a bird, but on the back it has a wing shaped just like you see in modern day planes. And they found this particular object, and if they threw it, it will fly a couple of yards. This is a model. So if they could make that fly, I'm quite sure that they could build a larger scale model to do the same thing.
If we could make that fly, I'm sure we
yeah,
could.
no doubt.
So, as you see, Egypt became an apex. He traveled everywhere. If you go to India, the first people who lived in India were African. They know that they're called the Dravidians now, the untouchables. Okay, Who did Gandhi lead? Untouchables. Interestingly enough, though, Gandhi was a light-skinned brother. Who did Gandhi lead? Untouchables. Interestingly enough, though, Gandhi was a light-skinned brother. And he had it good because he was a highly paid lawyer, wore the best clothes, had the... Yeah, you know, light skin. They had a caste system. The first caste system was in India. The Hindu system was a caste system. Darker you were, the lower you were in the totem pole, lighter you were, the higher you were in the totem pole. In all the islands, there's an African link to Hawaii, the Philippine Islands, and all of that happened during those time periods. So Egypt was the apex. What happened? What happened? Invaders. For a long time we were able to fight invaders. One thing that happened was the outsiders were not allowed to go through the mystery systems, to go to the universities. So even though these different groups had come over and taken over Egypt's government for a while, if they didn't have knowledge of the culture that the priests were teaching, you couldn't hold them down for long. If you notice, the first early conquest didn't last too long. I mean, a barbarian cannot control a civilized man. We can go get an ape from anywhere, put it in a cage, and it'll stay there. It may break out, we put it in a better cage. Because it is uncivilized. You can't do that to man. An ape can do that to man. We'll find a way out because we think. And that's why the conquest never lasted long. Until one thing happened. And as I said before, the tradition where a man would have a lot of wives from Ethiopia, make sure he was surrounded by intelligent women, that was a tradition among a lot of the pharaohs. And the Egyptian system was matrilineal. You couldn't become the pharaoh unless your mother was the queen mother, or you were connected by bloodline to that queen mother. So you could be as strong and smart as you want as a male. If you were not connected with that queen mother, you could not become the pharaoh. So, a lot of people invaded Egypt. There was this Libyan guy who was pushed into Egypt by some Greek mercenaries. That's why it's so important you can't let anyone with mercenary motives into your organization. These mercenaries pushed this Libyan guy, and he was of Libyan and African descent. He took for him a wife from Ethiopia, which was the tradition. The only thing that was different is instead of him gaining the throne, he took over the throne. He made his Greek boys the captains in the army of Egypt. And the whole army got peed off at him. So they left and went to Ethiopia. From that point on, Ethiopia, like I said, was never taken over by any other group. This guy from Libya married a sister, had his Greek boys, from Greece, to be the captains of the army. The army got left mad. 25,000 men. They had a 25,000 men army. They left Egypt. Took with them their wives, their children. Egypt was in a position where they couldn't fight off invaders. So if you can't fight too well, what do?
Submit.
You get real friendly. You learn how to joke with people, have people over, so people won't bother you. This king, this pharaoh, started allowing people from outside to go into Egypt and to study. Since the army had left, there was nobody to protect the priests. There was nobody to protect the mystery schools. There was nobody to stop them from going in. Now the mystery schools at that point there was some in Greece, there was some in Rome, because they didn't let them in, but they had them there because those were conquests of Egypt and Ethiopia. In Asia, in India, it talks about that. In Mexico, Aztec civilization, that's what happened. That's where it came from. This pharaoh let the Greeks in. These Greeks came in and studied, learned the information, because they had the priests, pretty much with a knife to their throat. Basically, you're going to teach them, I'm going to kill them. They learned that way. That's how they got into the universities. The brother sold them out. That's the interesting part of our history. Brothers sell other brothers out. Let brothers and people in where they shouldn't be in. Bring in foreign objects in our community which destroy us. Like crack cocaine, which is interestingly white. But I'm not down on anybody. Just saying it's interesting. I'm not down. I can't really down white people because, I know that I have white that was raped into my family back in the day. I know that. Some of it was loved into, the majority of it was raped. That's real. That's the American part of being African-American. Realizing we have a lot of Native American in us, but we also have some European that was raped into. That's part of being African-American. So I can't down anybody, because I'll be down a part of myself. You can down. And I hope you picked up on my sublime statement there. So anyway, he brought them in, and they learned. They didn't learn everything, but they learned. They learned the lower levels. Now, in that information packet, it tells you some of the things they learned and the process they had to go through. Some of the so-called fathers of medicine, mathematics, Pythagorean philosophy, they went and studied. Now, what's interesting is when these Europeans came and they studied, and they came back to their native areas, they were persecuted for teaching what? A foreign doctrine. They weren't teaching that the earth was flat. They were teaching that the earth was round. They weren't teaching that the the sun revolved around. They were teaching a whole bunch of crazy stuff. And it was Plato, it was Socrates, it was Diplodocus, it was all these people who were saying, no, that's not true, that's not what I learned. Aristotle was persecuted for teaching a foreign doctrine. They said that he was teaching students of things under the earth and in the sky. If you study what's under the earth, what science is that? Geology. If you study what's in the sky, what science is that? Astronomy. He was teaching geology and astronomy, which are two of the things that were taught in the mystery schools, and he was killed for that. Now, if the Greeks were killing people for teaching that stuff, how can they claim that was the beginning of civilization in universities and philosophy when they killed their own people for teaching philosophy? And they killed them for teaching a foreign doctrine. Another thing that was happening, and if you listen to KRS-One, he talks about it in one of his songs, how Sparta was in constant conflict with Persia, and they were always fighting each other. You cannot build and educate people when your nation is under war. It won't happen. That's why we got so many ignorant black folks. Because we always fight each other. We're in war with the ghetto, with the environment, and you can't educate people when they're under those conditions. They learn how to fight. But the funny thing about fighting is it takes you over. You don't just fight the enemy, you start fighting everything else around you. That's what happened to the Vietnam vets. That's what happens to any veteran group. That's why they have to take care of the veteran groups. That's what happens to brothers in jail. That's why they can come back and bum rush people on the street. Because they learn to fight, and that fight mentality doesn't just go against, they're not mad at the system anymore. They take it out on everybody. That's the funny thing about fighting. And that's why when you study martial arts like capoeira, which is African martial art, which is, if you study martial arts, it teaches discipline first. Because if you only teach warfare, then that's all that person will know. And in the ghettos, we don't teach discipline, we teach warfare. And that's why our people are in the condition they're in. So, these Greeks, these Romans, they took over Egypt, they learned the information. Alexander the Greek, we should not call him Alexander the Great. If I came in your house and beat you up, beat your mama up, smacked everyone, knocked your father up, are you going to call me great? Okay, Alexander the Great went into Egypt, went into Africa, smacked everyone up, raped the women, broke down the temples, stole, raped men. That's a part of Greek culture. If anyone in here has an alternative lifestyle, I'm not down. But that's part of Greek culture. That's part of European culture. That's just a part of European culture. Since a lot of us do have European in us way back in the day, that may explain. I'm not saying it does, but But Alexander the Greek did that stuff. He went and raped and pillaged. And we call him Alexander the Great. Why? Because our European teachers in their European books have said for so long that this was a great man. Doesn't this tell us a lot more about Europeans?
They're doing the same thing. It's good. They don't change.
Family fathers. You know why George Washington died?
Syphilis.
Shivers. Who do you catch it from?
I'm not sure.
The slave he was raised. Have you ever noticed there's more black people with the last name Washington than there's white people? George Washington was known to father many mulatto children. Yeah, but Washington was notorious for it. Interestingly enough, white women were regarded as being so pure that they weren't supposed to be sexual objects back in the day. You know, the sexual revolution that America went through was all about white women wanting some dick. This is getting it all the time. On the real. That's real. They weren't getting in it. And that's interesting. And when they made laws about blacks having intercourse with whites and how that was punishable by death, they didn't punish the white men, they did. They punished the black men and the white women. They didn't want them to mate. They did not want them to mate. That was in America. In South America and Central America, if you had one drop of white blood in you, you were considered white. You could be this sister's complexion, be considered white. Most Hispanics, when they go back to their native country, are considered white. In America, you had one drop of black blood, you were considered black. So, back to Africa. So they came in, they learned some of it, they went back. A lot of the first people were killed for teaching foreign doctrines. Then the Roman Empire took over Egypt. Rome became the center of the world. Roman soldiers, oh, I didn't know we had a small child here, I'm sorry, sister. Some of my comments are kind of off, I apologize, I didn't know we had a child. Rome became the center of the world. Roman Catholic Church, da-da-da-da-da. Roman soldiers who studied in Alexandria, who was named after Alexander the Greek, and Plato was reported to have written 4,000 books in his lifetime, complete books, like everything you want to know about astronomy. He's supposed to wrote 1,000 of them in different backgrounds and sciences. They were writing back then. Did you ever try to write in Greek? Latin? They use a whole bunch of words. He supposedly wrote 1,000 of these things. Of course, we all know he went and studied, and when Alexander the Greek took over, he was put in charge, and it was according to history, he was put in charge of taking over the libraries. He took over library books, re-recorded everything. Plagiarism. Plagiarism is a Greek word. They lived in, what time is it? The 7:20? Okay, I'll make this a speed, and I don't want to hold anyone up. These Roman soldiers started studying Egyptian information. These Roman soldiers were building the cathedrals in Rome. Who builds things? Masons. So these were bricklayers. They were masons. And they studied what was called structured masonry. And as they were building these things, they were studying these things from ancient Egypt because the first cathedrals were built based on Egyptian temples. So to build these cathedrals so that the light would come in at the break of dawn and stay until about 6 p.m., they had to study all this Egyptian stuff. To do that, they studied all the Egyptian sciences. So when they built these cathedrals, they knew what they were doing. Because they didn't have lights back then. But in the pyramids, in Mexico, in Africa, daybreak, the thing is lit up till about 6 p.m. Lit up. So to study that, to learn how to do that with their temples, they studied Egyptian information. They kept it amongst themselves. You had to be a mason to learn that information. After that, the kings and queens who were ruling this learned this information. Since they were too high-and-tidy to start laying bricks. They studied the information, and they called it speculative masonry. Out of this, the Masons originated. Out of speculative masonry. They stopped building things, they were just studying the information. You still had to get involved in the organization to be a part of it. Out of masonry. And it's hopefully that's in that information I gave you, maybe it's not. Europeans learned all this information. One of the biggest groups were the Druids. The Druids walked around with capes on, with hats that had snakes on them. If you read the Bible, Jesus said, be wise as a snake. Because the snake, he knew that symbology. Because he studied in Egypt. Be wise as a snake. Tells you when, we take that snake thing to the wrong, and it happens in Genesis. We think that snake's an evil creature. But then when Jesus says it, we don't know what to think about it. He ain't saying be wise and crafty and sneak and creep and do all crazy stuff. But Jesus was talking in parables, and like if you're an Alpha or an Omega, I can talk to an Omega. I've said a whole bunch of stuff already. If you're Q, you picked up on it. You know, we can talk in symbols. We can talk using phrases that are familiar with us. Alright? Jesus did that. If you notice, in the Bible, it never tells you what Jesus taught the disciples. He always teaching them in a back room. He was always teaching them in a hidden way. Because he was teaching them this information. So, these kings learned this information. Europe learned this information. The Druids went around teaching people. Interestingly enough, the Christians in 1492 had kicked the Moors out of Spain. If you go into Spanish museums, they have pictures of like European women standing like this on the head of a Moor, a black person. Because they had kicked them out of Spain in 1492, the same year that somebody sailed the ocean blue, using their maps. The same thing happened with the Druids. Christianity was blowing up. But the funny thing about Christianity, the kings and queens in Europe and their courts studied Gnostic science, which means true. Gnostic, gnomes are small creatures supposed to know a whole lot. Gnostic science, which meant true science. What did they give to the normal populace? The Bible. So while the normal populace was reading the Bible, which is filled with parables and symbolism and metaphors, that unless you're really trained in that, you can't pick everything out. You can pick out what you need. Yes, sir.
We have about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to, allow a question and answer period. So.
Well, let me get right to the heart of the matter.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't know I was under time constraints, and I do tend to get a little longer. Okay. So we had the Masons. Now, they came over the whole Boston. The Druids. They taught the Hermetic sciences. They went into Ireland and set up these mystery teachings again. Some pastor, some saint in Ireland, following the authority of the Roman Catholic Church, was supposed to get rid of these Druids, these Hermetic people who studied the Hermetic sciences. He went and killed all of them. His name was Patrick. Saint Patrick. Remember that story about him chasing the snakes out? It weren't snakes. If you study about Saint Patrick, he got rid of the Druids. They took all the information of Druids and they hid it. Who got the information? The kings and queens of Europe. Those are the same people who had the problem with Europe. They didn't want to get taxed anymore because now they knew as much as the kings did. And they were having so many problems. They started a new colony, which is America. George Washington in Fredericksburg, Virginia, became a Mason. George Washington did not employ anybody in his armies to be high-ranking unless they studied Masonry. Through the naval intelligences and army that America set up and it was coming from Europe, this Freemasonry, the speculative masonry, passed on. Now, Prince Hall, a light-skinned brother from the West Indies, wasn't allowed to study Masonry because they knew of his background. Abraham Lincoln wasn't allowed to study Masonry because his mother was black. She was light-toned sister. It's in this history. Prince Mason, Prince Hall, he got with some other West Indians who knew they were of African descent, who were light, bright, damn near white. They got into Masonry. He got involved with them. He became a Mason. He then wanted to charter a group of Masons in America. England gave him a charter. Why? Because England at that time weren't as race conscious as Americans were. They gave him a charter. He named his charter African Lodge. That's the first Black Mason. From the Black Masons, we had a group of men who became educated in Philadelphia in 1904, who became Sigma Pi Phi. Charles Wesley was a member and wrote the history of Sigma Pi Phi. Some of you brothers know what I'm talking about.
He's a historian for Alpha Alpha Fraternity Incorporated.
Many other Greek letter organizations, particularly the Pan-Atlantic Council, Ernest Everett Just, was a Mason. A lot of the faculty advisors who helped these groups set up these organizations were Masons. They took the information they got from Masonry and passed it down into so-called Greek letter organizations. Phi Beta Kappa, which started with a whole bunch of Masons, because they wanted to have a group on campuses that would make sure that the government's deeds were done. Greek letter organizations started out to make sure that the universities groups were able to teach them things that the college people would learn. We weren't ever intended to go to school. Once we started going to school, we started doing the same thing we saw our white peers doing. Okay, one of the founders of A-Phi-A was working in a white fraternity house. He and his boys who had the study group decided, hey, let's start our fraternity. Let's do this. The brother who was working, and I can tell you his name, do you want me to talk? What?
Yes, you can.
I don't have too much time. He said I don't have too much time. Basically, it's in the book, Fraternities. I think it's in the information I gave you. He learned traditions and symbolism from the whites that he worked for. He was janitor. He got this information. Some of the other brothers who started Alpha Phi Alpha were African studies major. I have to big up Alpha Phi Alpha because in one of their grand meetings back in the day, when they first started, they didn't have this thing. But they took that in. Once they would say, we're African people, we study this African history, let's make sure that something of Africa is in our fraternity. As a matter of fact, one of the gentlemen who gave the first 8 Alpha, and I don't claim to know what the information is, but it says in the book, he's quoted saying, I was uncomfortable with using Greek letters until I asked my faculty advisor, who was a Mason, can you tell me of something of African that starts with an A? And his faculty advisor said, Ethiopia. And he gave him the history of Ethiopia, the Ethiopians. It was spelled with an A back then, A-E, like the A-stop status, A-E-S. AKAs, same thing happened. The lady that originated, I know her first name was Ethel Hedgeman.
Ethel Hedgeman Live.
The Honorable Ethel Hedgeman, I don't want to disrespect anybody. She worked for a white professor who told her about sorority life. She was close with some other people. She took this information to help create what became Alpha Kappa Alpha. She didn't get all the information because for a long time, some of the rituals and some of the other things, the membership thing, they weren't in place because white lady didn't tell her everything. And it took a long time for them to get themselves together. Alpha Kappa Alpha, some of the 22 sisters departed saying, hey, we ain't got our stuff together. Let's start this. They had some ideas. One of the sisters who departed, the one who was leading it, said there's nothing about African in this. She wanted to connect with Africa by using a purple, the African violet, as a symbol. And it also would show a special bond with the members of Omega Psi Phi fraternity. They departed, and so these groups started. There's a big African base to everything that we do. There's very little that we do which is Greek. The Greek letters, and hopefully that's in the information, it shows you from the Egyptian to the Semitic to the Phoenician to the Greek, how those letters became. They weren't Greek letters at first. So, from African origins comes our so-called Greek letter fraternities and sororities. These rites and rituals that we do are African-based. There's a difference. And this is what I wanted this whole presentation to be based on. I'm not saying we should change our name. I may have said that 4 years ago. I said that 4 years ago. I'm not saying that now. We should take from these African and some Indian rituals that helped us become stronger. Because now we use these rituals just to get in. And after we get in, we may have some ritual every so often just to remind us. But they're not something that, these rituals don't empower us. We need to study these information about rituals, which you can find in this book, which you can find in this book. There's a sister named Ilya Van Sant, and I meant to have her book, but she has a book called The Power of Being. Get that book. It talks a lot about rituals, Yorubic rituals, that help strengthen black women, that help them shed some emotional stress. Get these rituals. We need to start doing rituals in our organizations that are going to make us strong. Right now, if you want to become bicyclists or whatever the term is, you vie for that position, and you learn leadership skills the wrong way by making mistakes and someone telling you. We should be training everyone in our organization to be leaders. Everyone in our organization to go take over and start a business and employ our people. I mean, all the money we spend on conclaves and step shows, we don't have a school. We don't have hospitals. All the money we spend on someone else's hotel, we don't have our big parties. We don't have daycare centers.
Not one thing.
That's what we need to get back into, because these rituals we did in Africa helped us with a communal sense. Of course it made us brothers. And we pledged. You had to go through starvation. You had to go through burning. You had to go through torture. You had to go through pain. You had to go with deprivation. You had to go without sleep. That's part of rituals. That makes you a strong person. But after the ritual was over, a lot of us become wild and loose like we were before we pledged. We need to keep doing that stuff so that we can create and build on our neighborhoods, our community, and our people. And that's what we lack right now. That's where we lack. And if we can pick up on these rituals, and you can just go to a black history book or a black bookstore and ask them for a book full of rituals, we will have stronger people. But our organizations are not doing a whole lot of leading right now. One more thing. The strongest people, the Boule, Sigma Pi Phi, advisor to the king. That's the name of that group tried to stop Marcus Garvey. They tried to stop Marcus Garvey. And brothers of Alpha, I'm sorry, but they tried to stop Martin Luther King. If you study Martin Luther King's history, the people in church were like, niggas sit down and shut up. And Alpha was saying, how can you disgrace our fraternity like this? They tried to stop that man. He distanced himself from it. Where have our leaders? A lot of us is pledged. Where are our leaders? We boast great membership, but little membership and leadership. So we need to kind of reevaluate ourselves and work on that. Yes, sir.
I was, as you know, in 1990, the Afrikan-American Council, they voted or whatever it is to abolish hazing.
Yeah.
And from what I can tell, that they just made a blanket statement of what hazing was, but they didn't study, I guess, the ritualistic practices of pledging. And I realized, I know for a fact that in our I believe it was in the late 40s and 50s, we abolished brutality. We did not abolish pledging. And from what I have seen since I've been in the organization, it seems that the level of talent that was in the fraternities and sororities, say in 1987, in comparison to 1997, has dropped significantly. I see a problem as far as members getting in organizations when they don't know the basic information of the organization, the basic role of the organization. And you tell people, well, why do you get in the organization? Well, they can't answer a question, and they've been in the organization 2 or 3 years. So my question is, I'm a big proponent as far as conspiracy theory, because I believe it exists, and there's too many signs that tell me it does exist. And I feel as though that there's an entity somewhere within this country that realized that fraternities and sororities were teaching things to young black men and women that they were using to become successful and empower the people. Maybe not to the magnitude that people would like, but they were empowering people. And most people empowered in the black community came from fraternities and sororities. So we have to look at how we can end this. And now fraternities and sororities, since the pledge process is abolished.
I tell you what messed that up: the sexual revolution. Look at the things that we were doing as a people. And look at things our fraternities and sororities were doing as people before the sexual revolution. And look at what happened afterwards. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. At this point.
Sex, drugs, and we stopped. We stopped doing a whole lot. And that's not just fraternities and sororities. That's our people on the whole. And like I said earlier, the sexual revolution wasn't about us. It wasn't about us. There's a lot of validity to that. Unfortunately, though, in our organizations, we allow too many people to get in because they can get girls, they can get pop forts, they were roughneck, they looked strong, they had this, they had that, and we lost the quality where we were building people. And that may have been some fault to it. Any other comments, very quickly?
Yeah, at this time, I'd like to open the floor up for any questions or comments that you may have.
And since you've already answered, I'm going to put you on the back burner. Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask you a question about this discussion. What was the meaning of people having to enter the school?
What was the meaning? I never went through it. But some of the things that was written, you had to go, it's in the information, did you give those information packets? You had to go through that place period where you were deprived of things. You had to endure torture. I mean, you had to prove that you were ready to take and focus on information. One of the reasons they did that is, once you learn this information, if you can focus on learning this information, I mean, knowledge, let me break this down. Knowledge, wisdom, understanding. 1, 2, 3. Knowledge is simply knowing something exists. Alright? You tell me something, if I tell you, yeah, I understand, I really don't understand, I just have knowledge of what you're saying. Wisdom is taking information I know exists and using it in my day-to-day life. And the more I use it in my day-to-day life, I get an understanding of it. Doesn't happen the first time, then happens third or fifth time. I have to keep doing it over and over and over. Going through a pledge process helps you take information and get to understanding. One of the things they had to do was go through that pledge process. Another thing they had to do was they had to testify. Now, we talk about people testifying in churches now, and churches have no idea what they're talking about. If you read and you study what the Egyptians drew on their pyramids, they have men like this. All right, we do it now. You grab your testes, and if you didn't know the information, it will cut off. Now, you would study hard if you had a test like that. These people studied hard. And that's where testifying came. That's where, if you look in the early church, they said women couldn't testify. They knew what they were talking back then. Now it's different. Testify just making your statement to God, to the community. Yet back then, you put your testes on the line. If you look at the pyramids, it shows you bits and pieces of the process. If you read that information I gave you, just bits and pieces. And I wish I knew everything. The Masons know a lot more than I do. But they're under threat of death, or they can't tell you. But there are some books that talk about some of the things. And I ran off some information dealing with yogaism, or becoming a yoga. Because becoming a yoga was one of the things they had to go through. They had to learn to control their breathing. Because your emotions are based on your breathing. When you get mad, you breathe a whole lot. When you're calm, you can reduce your breathing. When you're having sex, you have a certain breathing level. When you're studying and you're focusing on something, you have a certain breathing level. The less you breathe, the more focused you are. For us who try to hold out with a woman, you try to hold down that breathing. I do it.
We had some more questions
so
here.
They had to go through those things to master their body faculties, to make all those unconditional responses conditioned, where you can control your heartbeat, you can control your pulse rate. Once you have control over your body, you start beginning to get control over your mind. Yes?
You got confused when you were talking about Prince Hall, and you said that there's like one of the first black Masons towards the Western world, because you said you had mentioned back the Masons back in Africa. You know what I'm saying? So you meant Westernly, he was like, what?
We never used the term Mason in Africa or Egypt.
Okay, so what was it considered?
But they were called priests. If you go into one of the pyramids that most people go to, at the front of it says, know thyself. And under that it says, eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow you may die. We thought that was Greek sayings, but they're on the pyramids. They also have pictures of people playing chess on the pyramids. And the Moors brought chess into Spain. They also brought it in India before that. So most people, they use the Indian roots of chess. We've lost a lot of our history. Any other questions?
Yes, you had some over here.
I got a comment.
Yes, sir.
I guess common question. When the Greeks entered Egypt, this is my comment. When the Greeks entered Egypt, it wasn't that they took it. It was our nature as black people to be loving and to be caring and to educate the uncivilized. And at that period of time, the Greeks, or one sister said earlier, the freaks, because they were homosexuals, they were uncivilized.
Right.
And it was our duty to teach them. So that's how they entered the mystery schools, and that's how they started obtaining certain information dealing with the Masonic orders and the Boule and that type of master building, educating themselves about astronomy and geology and so on. My question is then, with the history that you have just posted, the history that you said, which is very, very profound, obviously that history has been lost when it came here because it was taken over by the Scottish, who are white, and who took the information and misconstrued it in a fashion due to their nature and added to it certain things that were devilish or uncivilized. And those things were picked up from the black Greeks. This is not a disrespect to any of the black Greeks here, but obviously the black Greeks here have picked up those things from those white fraternities, those white Masons, so therefore they got misconceptions as well too. So my question is, why doesn't just the black Greeks rearrange the whole situation other than order it around the white Masons and around the white Boule or the Boule per se? Why don't they rearrange the whole picture and other than calling themselves Greeks, call themselves Egyptians? Why don't they change the whole atmosphere, the whole everything about it?
Let me address that. First, there were two things. The Masons never learned from the black Greeks because by that time they had all the volcanoes and the earthquakes, and so they became mixed people, and they lost. If your house burned down, a lot of the information would burn down. So they lost a lot of that information, and that's one reason why it wasn't it wasn't Egyptian or Ethiopian colony anymore, because they lost all the connection. Okay. Secondly, with Prince Hall and that group becoming Masons, let me address your last question. When our fraternities were designed and set up, all over America, if you were a black person who could speak Greek, you would get a job in a white area. It was said that blacks had thick tongues and could not pronounce Greek and Latin. So there was this big wave in like Morehouse, and I'm talking Hampton and Livingston and some of the other colleges for normal agricultural learning that was set up for our people, where we studied a whole lot of Latin. We studied a whole lot of Greek. So they were touted basically as being the supreme languages and the ways of speaking. Most of our faculty advisors at these colleges, where our black Greek organizations began, had studied at these black schools. During that time where learning Latin and Greek was a big thing. If you read Up From Slavery by Booker T. Washington, he talks about the necessity of him learning Greek. And there was this woman that she wouldn't date a black guy because they couldn't speak Greek. When she found a black that could speak Greek, she married. It was that type of mentality because white said we couldn't learn Latin and Greek. And when one of us did, we were just upheld in the world. So if you can take that mentality of our people at that time and what these college students were aspiring to, it was just in it was just in American culture at that time. It wasn't just blacks. Everyone was Greek and Latin crazy. And it just came in that era where everyone was Greek and Latin. Everyone right now, to some degree, has been exposed to hip-hop. Okay? At that point, everyone who was somebody was trying to expose themselves with Latin and Greek. And that was just the mentality of the states. All right? Why don't they change it now? That's something they could do. Some of them have. Like I said, I big up Alpha Phi Alpha because they had these big meetings. And they said, when we started, we knew about Africa. Most of us were African studies majors. Let's put some African stuff in our fraternity. The Sphinx, I'm not going to give away their meaning of it, but a Sphinx is a body of a beast, a head of a man, and a crown of God.
And it teaches that our natural senses is to be beastly. When little kids grow up, they steal from each other, they hit each other, they cry, they act like beasts, they're uncivilized. The more they use their heads, the more they become like men and women, and they can control their instincts. Animals act simply on instinct. If a dog sees a piece of meat, he don't care if it's yours, he tries to go after it unless you civilize that dog. And so a beast is our basic nature. And when we don't check ourselves, we act like beasts. Men act like beasts sometimes. Women are real catty sometimes. When we don't check ourselves, we act like animals. Once we use our minds, we become human. And the more we use our minds, we become closer to God. That's what that's thinking. So, I mean, some of the groups have taken in African things. And, you know, they're taking groups. I mean, Omega Psi Phi had the biggest presence of the black group organizations at the Million Man Month. They're doing some good things. Not enough, I don't think. And I was the first to, I mean, I don't walk around with Greek letters. I mean, I got my brand. I don't walk around with Greek letters. Because I know this information that kind of bothers me. But if you look at it from an outsider's view, you won't understand the mentality that these organizations were built up in the time period. And so if you went to college, you had to learn Latin and Greek, or your parents were not paying for you to go to college.
And I would also like just to add my personal feelings on that. I can only speak for Alpha Alpha, but it's Greek on the surface, but its nuance, its tone, its gesture, the underlying foundation is African-based. You know, it's only Greek on the surface. We use this as a medium to, you know, empower ourselves. You know, when Alpha Alpha was originally started, it began. Well, one of the reasons it began because we couldn't become part of Kappa Alpha or some of the other organizations. You know, like as I said before, we have a strong African foundation. You know, just like Kunti Cullen used Shakespearean rhyme scheme in order to articulate black thought. You know, he used European methods. You know, kind of like how rappers, you know, take English, you know, which is European, which evolved from African languages, but it's essentially European. But they take it and they twist it and they make it black. And it's the same thing with black fraternities and sororities as well. You know, we take something European and twist it and give it our own dynamics. So.
There weren't any black books being printed back then anyway, so the general populace weren't, you know. There were very few, there was like 3 or 4 books that was being published that they would allow them to have on black campuses. So, I wish it was different. I truly do, because I'm very Afro-centric. That's just the nature of things.
We had some more questions, I'm sorry.
I think it was a question, Jermaine.
I was going to say, what the brother was asking earlier, about when we talk about certain rituals and certain rites and processes, and you read the book, Stolen Legacy, he talks about a lot of the what went on in the mystery schools, about the what you call a sphere. They get into a lot of that in the book called that being called Stolen Legacy by what is it? George James. Yeah, they talk about a lot of that ritual in the book, the mystery school.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just to add another aspect to what the other brothers were saying about fraternity sorority. First of all, I like to say, as long as we stay in America, if you notice, you have more Afrocentric movements going on. So it's kind of like a boomerang effect, where we're moving back to our natural state. We're doing it slowly, but we're moving back there. You know, we use more black symbols today than we used maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So we're starting to get less as far as becoming more of an assimilation mentality.
Access to information.
Okay, and more of an Afrocentric mentality. And like my prep brother said here, it's only Greek on the surface, and a lot of people who attack the Greek letter organization, they attack the fact that we use Greek letters, but just like the brother said, Greek letters are nothing more than, or a derivative from the original African texts. And the only thing, and I'll say right now, the only thing that's Greek about our organization are the 3 letters. Other than that, I mean, I can't go into detail, but that's it. And I know that me and this brother and several other brothers, we build amongst ourselves about ancient Africa. And most of the things we talk about are Afrocentric in nature.
Well, let me take this to another level very quickly. A lot of, if you read the information that was given to you, a lot of these letters came from Africa. So, basilis is a term that we use in Omega Psi Phi, some other organizations use too. Basilis came from basilis, which was adopted by the Greeks, which was an Egyptian term for somebody who was second to the pharaoh. Boule, I told you before, is a Greek term, but it stands for council in Greek. Minerva, which is the sister who's on top of VST's shield, she is derived from a lot of different. She's a Roman goddess, but she was based on a Greek goddess who was based on an Egyptian goddess. So what happened is the Greeks said, "Oh man, that's what this sister is," but they used a different name to refer to her as, and then the Romans used a different name to refer to her as. But it's still a black woman. So even though it's a Roman name, it's based on a Greek name, it's actually pointing to a African woman's name, Anna, which comes from Athena. Athena turned into Minerva. Okay. The Oracle, which is another thing Omega Psi Phi uses as the name for our quarterly magazine. An oracle is something like if you saw the Lion King, you saw the monkey throw out all those things and he read the leaves. Whenever you use nature to reveal to you something that's happening or some information, that's called an oracle. So those gypsy cards and those balls, those are all oracles, but they relate to those are African things. The Sphinx, I just talked about that. The pyramid. Pyramid is deep. Four corners, 3 sides, physical, spiritual, mental. 4 elements in the earth: fire, air, water, air. And it means constantly flowing. Whenever you have all 4 of those things, you have constant motion. Whenever you have mental, physical, and spiritual working together, you have somebody who's alive, who's constantly moving. When you have man, woman, and child, you have a family that's constantly moving. I mean, it's deep. And I only did a third of my presentation, and I really feel like I need to come to just answer a few more questions. But if you pick up the books and you read what I gave you, and you just use the top of it and go buy those books, you'll find out more information. But the big thing is, we need to use our rituals more to make ourselves stronger. Yes, sister?
I was going to respond to what the brother had said over here, the one that was videotaping. He said that how the Greek letter organizations had taken the European concept and turned it to symbolism and made it into African. So a lot of things that the brothers and sisters do, or a lot of the symbolism that they have is African. My thing is, I really don't know a lot about the Greek letter organization. I don't deal with it. I mean, everybody's all cool, we're all black, that's good. But I don't know information about that. But my thing is, sometimes you have to, instead of twisting the concept and making it into African, you have to go back and just make it African. Just like Europeans, they go ahead and they accept things. A lot of times I see it as just being Europeans. They go ahead and accept things. Of course, we have our step shows. That's good. You can see that. But African, or the African concept, is to bring back into your community. And just like what you had said earlier, those concepts that they had, the 10 principles, or the dealing with the pledging and stuff, or the things that you learn or you're being initiated into, you have to take that and bring it back. We have elementary schools all around Norfolk. Our school is in a very bad area. Why aren't the organizations taking their African concepts, the African theories, and giving back to the community? Young's Park, we've been down to the elementary school. It doesn't make any sense. It's right down the street. But what I'm saying is to bring back the community, even right here on this school, to bring back into the community. I know a lot of you guys don't have stuff to say, but what I'm saying is these are things that you guys may do this stuff, but these are things that we as outsiders do not see. Only thing we see is you stepping. We don't hear about you doing stuff. Let us see this. I'll be quiet.
I want to stop saying. You said the same thing I said my sophomore year at Hampton when I was getting ready to start pre-pledging my name. The same thing. I don't see it. They need to be more involved. Yes.
Okay, and quickly,
I think we all agree with you. And so even if these other people had things to say, well, we're doing this, we're doing that, we all agree with you. You're right. I don't want to get into this thing where we start proving ourselves right now, okay?
Yeah.
And I felt that feeling coming up.
Right, I'm going
if you have any questions based on what I was talking about, I'll answer those. If not, then I'll end, and if you want to talk about
Okay,
some
what I'm going to do is
that's-
this.
that's all good.
I'm going to quickly respond because I know that a lot of people were raising their hand because they have objected to what the sister was saying. But the unfortunate part is that, people that are belonging to these organizations have a lot on their shoulders, okay? We're full-time students. I know the brothers Alpha Alpha, many of us work full-time, okay? But just not to try to justify, because you're absolutely right, there should be more. It is not only just recently, and I'll even put my organization out there, it is not only till recently where we got our stuff together to start having regular community service projects. It was about 3 weeks ago that we started mentoring and tutoring at the Spartan Academy for educating black males at the Brambleton Center, and also doing the tutorials at Booker T. Washington and also Bowling Green. The unfortunate part about it is that we don't brag about a community service. We don't let people know what we're doing. So it's a matter of perception, And I will just hearken you. If just because you don't see it particularly, doesn't mean that we're not doing it. What you should do is bring that to the attention of Greeks, because we're always trying to figure out, well, what can we do now? We've done this. What can we do? Bring it to our attention. Say, look, these kids at Young's Park need help, and you guys should go help them, and we will go do that.
I don't want to stop you, but you just did what I didn't want to go to.
Right. Well, I was just I'm just echoing the sentiment.
But on the real, we don't have to depend on organizations to do things. So I'll leave it at that. Okay, do you have any other questions based on what I talked about? I only went through a third of my presentation. I'm sorry. Maybe at a later date I can get some more. Hampton sisters? What's up? I got to big them up. They're in the process of building something similar to our organization. And it's going to be a great thing. I'm really looking forward to it. My freshman year at Hampton, I played the organization called One Incorporated. We're in the process of changing a lot of our symbols to African. It's a hard process. Any questions based on what I was talking about? If not, I'm going to...
Can I just say one thing real quick?
Yes, sir.
It's about what he said earlier about the Greek names. He mentioned that, did you say a Greek? The earlier white fraternities did not accept the black people or something? You said something when you were standing
Okay, what I said was that when Alpha Alpha was established, there had been certain black men who were trying to get into white fraternities. And because of the racism, which is contradictory in nature because these fraternities are based on African principles, we weren't able to get into them. So we built our own system.
Okay, so my question is that, if they did not want you when they had the Greek names, why then develop your own and still use their names?
Once again, with that mentality, I tell you what, sister, up from slavery, Booker T. Washington, and read the diary of Frederick Douglass. No, she wasn't listening, so I was going to wait. Up from slavery, Booker T. Washington, diary of Frederick Douglass. Read Madam C.J. Walker, her autobiography, and you'll see how it was like Greek and Latin crazy America. It just swept through America and through universities. So they were kind of doing what they did. I mean, you have on European clothes now because that's what's available to you. Okay.
Excuse me. Before you cut off,
Last comment.
I was going to make a quick comment. When these organizations were founded, I was in 1906, that it was roughly 30 to 40 years removed from Reconstruction. Okay, so you're looking at taking a people who have been broken down from slavery and they're starting to get themselves together. So, but another thing too, the Alpha Alpha you see in 1997 has a lot from the Alpha Alpha 1906, but it's also different because a lot of the icons that we use and the symbols that we use, we have further studied, we have further brought to the surface, and they have more relevance and meaning in our organizations now. So the mentality that they had in 1906 is different from the mentality we have in 1907, but it's the same to some degree.
One last thing. The book I talked about, Ileana Van Sant, is called Tapping the Power Within. I'm sorry, Tapping the Power Within. Pick that book up, sisters. It's tight. It's real tight. She talks a lot about Yorubic rituals, and study Yorubic rituals. Anything you can find out about Yorubic people, because they have a lot of rituals. Matter of fact, Yorubas in Cuba and in Puerto Rico are crazy deep. They're real deep. If you study Santeria, which is the Afro-Cuban or Afro-Puerto Rican belief system, it's real deep. And it has a lot of religious and pledging rites and information in that too. A lot of symbols and rituals. And these are things that can help our people. So, ladies and gentlemen, in the name of... I'm going to big up the Alphas for allowing me to speak today. I want to big you up for coming out And thank you. Have a nice day.
All right, one thing before you guys go. We're having another seminar tomorrow, same time, same place. It's titled, if you see the posters, it's going to be titled African-American Political Prisoners of War. And it's unfortunate that I had to title it as such, because what the seminar is about is the case with Mumia Abu-Jamal. The university does not want the MOVE organization, the organization which is geared towards freeing this black man on this campus. They didn't want me even, I said, well, I'll talk about it. They didn't even want me to talk about it or anyone else. So what I had to do in essence is trick the university, because we have to educate by any means necessary. So that will be in here tomorrow. And like the girl right here said, we're oral people, so spread that word around, okay? Also tomorrow, the organization of Black Unity is having, you see the flyer right there? It's having a seminar at 12:30, correct?
Right.
Okay.
12:30, Brownwood Hall, B189.
Right. And I'm happy to see. Until recently, it wasn't until recently I realized we had an organization of Black Unity, and we don't need to be, fraternities over here and then organization of Black Unity. We should be all as one.
Yes.
And this is also Alpha Week, and we have a week full of events. On Wednesday, we're having at 12 o'clock Alpha Afternoon of the Arts. The Energy Jazz Band will be performing, and the Endowment African Dance Troupe will be performing. On Thursday, we're having a computer seminar teaching basic computer skills inside the Style and fellowship at Uno's Restaurant, and also community service on Saturday at the Bramlington Community Center, and also car wash at McDonald's on 5th Street. Yes, sir.
And I can agree with brother. Now, I have seen personal things that alphas, even in the graduate and the chapters and what have you, because one of my scholarships came through graduate chapter of Alpha, so I know things are done. But what I would like to see amongst any kind of organization, but especially those on campuses, because I see a lot of times that the fraternities and sororities have somewhat of influence on certain sections of the university campus, people my age and younger. I would like to see that influence spread out to brothers and sisters, not necessarily on that level, but even my age that may not be in college, they didn't have the opportunity to go to college, they would get that same influence, because they're influencing the younger brothers, so that's what I'm talking about.
And one last thing before you guys go. There's a lot of good discussion here. Seko is kind of long, but we appreciate it. Personally, one thing I wanted to see this evening is to get down to the nitty-gritty. He had to give you a foundation, but because of time constraints, we weren't really able to get down to the nitty-gritty. She hit out the nitty-gritty right there. Why are we calling ourselves Greek? Although that, we realize now that we're not Greek. We have a different mentality. How come certain stereotypes still exist? And these are questions that still need to be answered. So we will be having a seminar again next semester, okay? And I hope they can come out and know what to actually do with it. Thanks. Good night.
Herbs and that's and that. Going on, start growing my locks.